Hi, good morning, or good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you're watching us from via the live stream. I'm Taryn Almanzar, and on behalf of Columbia's Graduate School of Journalism, welcome, and thank you for taking the time to learn about our programs, see how they fit into the journalism world and your careers. Before I begin, I would just like to know a little bit about you, and for those of you who are watching us via the live stream, if you can let us know where you're watching us from and what program you're interested in. While you're doing that, by raising your hands, if you can let me know, how many of you are from the US? Great. New York City? Fantastic. International? Hi, welcome. Great. Now let's learn a little bit about which programs you're interested in. The MS in journalism, MS in data journalism, great. MS dual degree with engineering, hi, welcome. MA program, okay. PhD, okay, great. So with that said, do we know, I'm just gonna have my colleague, Ross Yelsey, let me know who is watching us via live stream. And it's from Houston and from Nigeria. Welcome and thank you. So with that said, let's, if you turn to your agenda, just so that you can have an idea of what to expect for the next couple of hours, we will have 2 panels. One of our faculty members who will discuss the programs, a little bit about their backgrounds and what we're looking for and what you can expect in each of the different academic programs. Then we'll have a student panel of current students and a graduate. And with that said, we actually have a graduate of our program, MS 2016. He's not part of our panel, but we were so happy to see him. Daniel Rodriguez, who's currently working in NBC, if you can raise your hand so that we can see you. So corner him after the info session. And then we'll have career development, just talk a little bit about the landscape in journalism and what you can expect after you're done with the program. And then, of course, you'll be hearing from our office, the admissions and financial aid, just a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of the admissions process, the scholarship funding that we offer, because we do offer scholarship aid, and what are the eligibility requirements and how you go about the whole process. So with that said, as you go through the program, I will just urge you to, as you're listening to the professors, to the students, think of where you're at in your career. Think about what it is that you need in order to move forward in it, and how do you see the program and the J School propelling you and helping you move along. This is your opportunity to ask questions. Ask, we're here. And as I like to say, asking saves a lot of guessing work. All right, so with that said, I would like to invite our faculty members, if you would be so kind as to step forward and we can begin. Oh, and as they're walking forward, I forgot to say this. We're going to have, after each panel, each presentation, about 15 minutes to ask questions. Those of you who are watching the live stream, please be sure to ask, and my colleague Ross will bring your question forward. For those of you that have the questions, if you can step forward to the mic, we're going to have it set up, just so that the people who are watching us via live stream can hear the question as well. So, thank you. Oh, yes. Thank you, Christine. I completely forgot that. Christine Souders, our Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid, is here. And actually, as I introduce Christine, this is Ross Yelsey. You're going to be hearing from him, not today, but later on in one of our other info sessions, Assistant Director of Marketing and Admissions. And then we have Mr. David Hooker, who most of you have met already, who is our coordinator / lifesaver. So, oh, and before I forget, at the end, Jim Patel, who is handling our live stream and who is the director of our studio, has kindly said that for those of you who are interested, can take a tour of the Thesis studio upstairs. So take us up on the offer. Okay. All right, so without further ado, if you can introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about the program, that'll be great.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elena Cabral, and I am the director of the PartTime program, the PartTime MS program. How many of you are interested in that program? Great. Well, it does tend to attract New Yorkers who work in the city or in the surrounding area and want to do this MS program, but don't necessarily have the wherewithal or the desire to quit their day jobs to do it. That's how I did this program myself, and I went on to work for the Miami Herald and for Scholastic News, and came back to be an adjunct here, and then started running this program, which I love, and which just celebrated its 25th anniversary last year. So last year, yeah. So this program is spread out over 2 years, and it's very attractive, you know, for those of you who've been out of school for a while and have been working for a bit, and who really want to take advantage, because none of us ever do in college, let's face it, with all of the perks and privileges of being a student again, especially in the media capital of the world, where you are now eligible for scholarships and internships and fellowships and all sorts of really exciting things. What I like to say right off the bat is that this 2-year program, where you're knocking out the very same course requirements as the MS degree students in reporting and writing and visual storytelling, investigative techniques, and so forth, is that it's not a night school per se. There's so much that goes on in this building every single day, whether it's, you know, a data workshop or a career services seminar on how to write a killer cover letter, or just some terrific speakers. You don't want to miss out on that. So in a bit, I'll talk a little more or answer questions from any of you who would like to know a little more about how our students juggle work and family and other obligations with this degree program. It is possible, but it's a lot of work.
Hello, everybody, and those who are watching online. My name is Janina Zegnini, and I'm the director of the Data Journalism Program. First of all, I want to congratulate you for your interest in journalism. I think there's never been a better time to become a journalist, and it's too much fun as well. So the Data Journalism Program is a separate degree. It used to be a concentration for the last 4 years. And so last year we started with this completely unique program that fully integrates data and journalism. It's a 3-semester program. The students come here in May, and they spend the summer coding and learning about, you know, all the skills, plus reporting one. And then in the fall, everything is customized. The reporting classes, data-driven seminars in the spring. But the most important thing is, you know, data journalism could mean anything for different people. Some people think that it's about graphics and math, but it's, technology, design, and all those things. So we take advantage of them, but truly, the core of this program is finding stories out of the data, and not just the data, but we also talk to humans. So it's integrating data as a tool, you know, to empower journalism and find things that otherwise you couldn't find. For instance, you cannot interview 28 million people for a story, but you could easily interrogate a data set in seconds with more than 28 million records. So that's what we do. We're bringing the students, all the students have to work on a data-driven project, which is a story, and it takes many forms, multimedia, visualizations, but more importantly, it's all about finding relevant stories out of the data. I came here in 2014. I'm an investigative journalist. I don't like labels in general, but if I have to define myself, I'm an investigative journalist who happens to use data to investigate, and not the other way around. And I was an investigative reporter for 30 years, working for I'm from Costa Rica originally, so I worked in different media organizations there, and then for ICIJ, which is the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. We developed the first data platform for ICIJ back in 2013, and also I run cross-border investigative data fellowship. I know it's too long, the name, but but the reason why is because this is kind of a new trend in journalism, collaborative, cross-border investigative reporting. You know, everything is globalized. Organized crime, religion has always been globalized. Everything. So we also need to see the problems of this world with a wider perspective, and also collaborating with other colleagues across the globe allows us to see patterns that are just in front of us. So this fellowship, we work together with different media organizations here in the US and across the world in different investigative projects. So I would be happy also to talk about that later. Thank you.
Good morning to everyone here and to those who are watching. My name is Jane Eisner. I am the director of the Masters of Arts program. This is my first year here. As a working journalist and an administrator, I have a degree, an MS degree from the journalism school from way back when. Worked at newspapers in Norfolk, Virginia, and Philadelphia. I most recently was editor-in-chief of The Forward from New York, and then came here to run this marvelous program. The MA program was started about 14 years ago. It is meant for journalists who have had some experience already and seek to deepen their knowledge and capabilities in one of four areas: arts and culture, politics, business, and science. The idea is for these more experienced journalists to come here and really focus on one of the four subject areas, but also to increase their skills in other ways as well. So everyone in the program takes a course called Evidence and Inference. Everyone takes courses in investigative and data journalism. All the students are also invited to take courses in the university as a whole, which is a really amazing experience. And most importantly, work on a master's thesis. The work has already beginning. It is meant to be a very long project, mostly in print, but some do podcasts or video, that is meant to be a capstone experience. My colleagues here from Science and Arts will talk a little bit more about their specialties. So just a word about business and politics. The business concentration is headed by Winnie O'Kelly, who's a seasoned business reporter and editor from the New York Times and now at Bloomberg. She's amazing. The class really goes very, very deep into understanding business, accounting, finances. Because Winnie has such an extensive background herself, there are all sorts of people who come into the class to speak. Yesterday, they went on a field trip to the Bank of America. They really immerse themselves in the world of business, economics, and finance, and come out of this program equipped to cover these areas in some of the very top institutions. The politics concentration is our largest concentration. Nick Lemon, the former dean of the journalism school, is an instructor in politics, as is Alexander Stile. They're both superb teachers. Politics is thought of as in a very broad way. They study state formation and the way countries have evolved, social movements, different political trends, do a lot of writing, and also experience politics from a much broader perspective. Obviously, right now, it's kind of an interesting subject, and certainly will be next year. About half the class is from the United States, about half are from countries all over the world. Asia, Latin America, Europe. For the first time, we think ever, we have a student from the Faroe Islands, which is very cool. And the class is also pretty equally divided between men and women, which is interesting as well. This is a program that you can do as a second-year program after doing the MS degree, or if you're already working as a journalist and you have decided that I want to be the best political journalist in my country, or in fact the world, then you come here to learn about that and join that program. So I hope that some of you are interested in it. I know that you will be after you hear my colleagues describe what they do. And thank you again for your attention.
That was excellent. I have very little to say after that about the MA program. My name is David Haydu, and I co-teach the Arts and Culture seminar in the MA program with my colleague Elisa Solomon, who's brilliant. Just a bit about myself before talking about the program. I'm going to pick up on Jane's word. She described another of our colleagues as seasoned. So I'm a longtime arts writer. I'm currently the music critic for The Nation. I write mostly about music, but also about film, comics, graphic novels, and culture more broadly. Before joining The Nation, I guess about 5 years ago, I was the music critic for The New Republic for 12 years, and I've written for the Atlantic Monthly, Harper's, The New Yorker, The New York Review, and such. And I was a top editor at a magazine called Entertainment Weekly for 10 years, and I prefer seasoned to rapidly aging, so let's use seasoned. When I came very early in the history of the MA program, and I think of the MA program as a program that I wish existed when I was coming up as a journalist, and I often put together our classes with that thinking. You know, what did I wish I knew? At Entertainment Weekly, for instance, when I was a top editor, we would freely throw around terms. These are literal terms that we use. We refer to postmodern heels. Not just postmodern fashion, but postmodern heels. And barista culture. And I got into a discussion one time about the popularity charts that we listed in every issue, that were box office scores and best-selling best-selling albums and books, when things actually sold and didn't just stream. And I got into discussion about whether that kind of popularity constituted value. Does that mean they're good? And I hit a dead end because I wasn't prepared to fully discuss that. I didn't understand the idea of a social proof, which I needed to know. I didn't understand. I would throw around barista culture. I didn't fully understand what culture was. I didn't really understand what postmodern meant. It's an impressive sounding word. It's fun to name check, but I didn't understand it in a deep way. So our program in the MA broadly, and specifically in the arts, is for people who feel like they could do much better by deepening their expertise and their authority and their base of knowledge in specialized subject area, and can improve their thinking. as well as their practical tools, how to research, how to write in specialized subject area. So over the course of the first term, we do a lot of theoretical work. We study what is art. We study some aesthetic theory. We discuss what is the role of the artist in society. We discuss various conceptions of culture. We do the very deep dive into all these deep questions, and then, broadly speaking, in the second term, we look at issues of arts and practice. We look at how the art marketplace works. We do a visit to the Chelsea galleries. We do a deep dive into intellectual property law. And we do much of this, about a third of the classes, in collaboration with specialists in this subject area. It's one of the great attributes of this program is that it's not taught only by us. We're just fine, but we also draw on the brain trust, the talent pool of people here, brilliant scholars here at Columbia and elsewhere. So when we do a unit on anthropology, we bring in a leading anthropologist from the anthropology department. When we do critical theory, we bring in a theorist, Andreas Huyssen. When we do intellectual property law, we just so happen to have two of the leading specialists in copyright law in the world here at Columbia, Jane Ginsburg, who comes from a family in jurisprudence here, and she co-teaches that with us. We do quite a bit in the arts concentration on the ground, taking advantage of New York being one of the arts centers in the world. We see Shakespeare, we visit rehearsals, we see performances, we do rehearsals of performances, we have artists come in. So the students cover an arts festival in the fall, which they're in the midst of doing right now. They're on the ground covering a festival called Crossing the Line, which is an avant-garde arts festival. So it's a lot of fun. And it's challenging, it's hard, and it's what I wish I had when I was at that point, and maybe I would have done better sooner. And so we're here to help you if you're interested in doing that. Don't be scared away if you're coming straight from the undergraduate ranks or if you don't have years of experience. Just this year, for instance, we have a student who came straight from undergraduate school, happens to be brilliant, happens to have been freelancing for the Boston Globe while he was an undergraduate. So if you're an undergraduate, but really good, talk to us. And that's Arts and Culture, David Haydu. The J is silent. Thanks.
When we do these panels, I often feel, having listened to my colleagues, like, I'd really like to take that course. I'd really like to take that course. The MA program, as Jane said, is now 14 years old. I can't believe it's 14 years old because I was here, my first year here at Columbia was the first year of the program. And I've found it to be just a perfect fit for what I had been doing as an independent writer all my life. My name's Jonathan Weiner. I've written half a dozen books about science. I've written articles for The New Yorker and The New York Times and many other places, Slate, et cetera, just trying to...
How many Pulitzers, Jonathan?
One.
Okay.
Thank you, David. I have always wanted to write about science as a writer. I always wanted to feel that I was coming at these subjects as a human being, as a humanist first, not coming at it as a scientist, which I am not. And that is the thrill of the MA Science program to me, is that we bring together people who are very interested in journalism, very excited to report and write, but don't necessarily have a strong background in science. So I want to say that right up front for anyone who might be tempted and interested in this kind of underpopulated area of journalism. There are a lot of people who are excited about investigative reporting in politics. And thank God for that, because we really need them. But there's also an incredibly rich amount of reporting and storytelling to do with science and technology and health and medicine and all those subjects that tend to scare some of our colleagues in journalism, and there's really no reason to be scared. The same principles apply, the same storytelling principles apply everywhere, and you can get very deep into amazing territory very quickly in a program like this. So with the MA Science program, I also co-teach it with a wonderful colleague. Marguerite Holloway is an environmental reporter, spent many years as an editor and writer at Scientific American, and a remarkable teacher, one of the best in the university. She won a presidential teaching award a few years back, which is a high honor. So we divvy up the year. I'm teaching it right now in the fall, looking mostly at the life sciences, and Marguerite will take it up in the spring and look mostly at environmental sciences and the so-called hard sciences, the physical sciences. There's a lot of overlap. I mean, if you look at what is arguably the single biggest story of our time for our generation and your generation and probably coming generations, it's climate change. This is a story that scientists have been talking about and seen very clearly for 40 years. And now we all see it. Now we all experience it. And it's on us as journalists to follow these enormous stories, try to make sense of them, try to get them into a form that will reach people. So we have the same general format as arts and culture, business, politics. We bring in wonderful experts from around the university and the city to share their expertise with us. With climate change, for instance, it's one of the leading climate scientists in the world, Gavin Schmidt, who runs a NASA program in the study of climate change, believe it or not, from offices over Tom's Restaurant. I don't know if you've seen Tom's Restaurant on your way here, a famous tourist site a couple blocks away. So it's not well known, but it's a center for the study of climate change. And we've also met with an astrobiologist who has turned from questions about the origin of the universe to asking about, are we alone in the universe, and looking for life on other planets, which would be the story of the millennium if we succeed in finding life on other planets. And all of that is to set up a deeper understanding of life, which we're now going to be informed by as we turn to medicine and the international AIDS crisis and Ebola and many other areas that bring together everything that we know about the science of life in order to save lives. So it's extraordinary territory. I can't do justice in a couple of minutes to how many directions it goes and how many directions you can take it. Our graduates, after writing theses about an incredible range of subjects, often publish them in amazing places. One about an octopus farm in Mexico just ran in Time magazine. That was a student that I advised 2 years ago, Tick Root. A story from that same year ran in Mother Jones about climate change and its impact on small communities in Louisiana. We have a student from last year at Frontline. We have students at the Washington Post, the New York Times, great places all over. And many students, international students, decide to go back to the country that they had come from and do spectacular reporting at a level that they had hoped to achieve. And I think the year here really makes a difference for them over the course of their entire careers. So I hope you'll think about it. I hope you'll consider it, even if you hadn't been considering writing about science and medicine and the environment. It's a fabulous direction to look at. And it's almost like, to use a slightly jargony term, it's almost like an empty niche. It's an opportunity to move in and explore and get a little bit away from the crowd and do great work. And if you come here as an MS student, keep in mind that some people go on from the MS to the MA once you've gotten your chops as a reporter and you've gotten Basic Reporting 101, which is a fantastic program here, the MS. You can go on to the MA and advance your skills, both in the reporting and writing and in the knowledge of the special beat that you've chosen to deepen and grow in. All right, thanks a lot.
That was great. Thank you so much. Before I open it up for questions, if we can just talk a little bit about the MS program, because we've gotten a wonderful window view into the MA, but just what the academic year looks like, what kind of classes are available, and then we'll open it up for questions, just so that we can provide a little bit of context for those who are thinking of the MS program.
Okay, so the classic MS program, the 10-month program, that enrolls most of our students and that we've been known for more than 100 years, is a 10-month program. Students arrive here in mid-August, and they dive right into the essential foundational reporting class, in which they fan out across the city, sometimes in thematic ways. My reporting class, for example, focuses on social justice reporting. Others will do geographic beats. And the purpose of that is to really focus on essential skills: interviewing, how to news gathering, how to navigate the institutions of New York City, and so forth, and also how to embrace the use of social media, for example, as a reporting tool and as a way to engage with audiences. Then students take a series of required courses where the writing module follows that, and they choose among a group of courses that fall within a bucket known as the image and sound module. This is where you start to refine your degree, your curriculum, according to your preferences. So you may be interested in video reporting, audio reporting, photography, or data. And this is separate and apart, obviously, from the data MS program. As Janina pointed out, there are lots of ways to be an investigative reporter, and our MS students do get a taste of that in a requirement known as investigative techniques, which they can take as well, which they have to take as well. Right around the fall semester is when they meet individually with their master's advisors to do their capstone master's degree, project. That is to say, a long-form storytelling project in the form of a magazine piece. Some students will opt for a 20-minute audio piece, very much in the line of a This American Life story, for example. And this is a piece that they're working on really from the fall into the mid-spring. They get a break during the fall, during those winter during which they're expected to be working on their master's project. It's a break, but not quite a break. And in the spring, they take these big 15-week classes that really run the gamut from book writing to covering religion to sports reporting. So some are subject-focused and some are platform-focused, where they may go more deeply into Daniel Alarcon's radio seminar, for example. They're called seminar and production classes, these 15-week classes, because you're in a classroom, you're learning from your professor in a lecture, hearing from guest speakers and so forth, but then you're putting together a product. For example, in Sam Friedman's book, it's a book proposal, at the end of which you expect to have an agent, and you're going to publish that book. And obviously, the documentary students who focus in that area similarly are getting a very professional education, not just in the formation of the doc itself, but in the marketing and how to apply for grants and for film festivals and the like. So those 2 courses are offered in the spring. And am I missing any other of the requirements? No, I don't think so. But in between a lot of those classes, there's a lot of training involved, which you'll hear more about and from our career services team. I always like to think that should actually be a required course because it involves an intense array, a series of training in everything from how to polish your resume, how to interview, how to write that cover letter, as I mentioned earlier. And so our students in the full-time MS program are quite busy. They really don't have a lot of time to do internships, but they do learn a lot about how to apply for them as they're getting ready to graduate. 10 months is not a long time, and so getting ready for that summer experience and really selecting carefully is in itself, as I said, a course unto itself. The part-time program spreads out those requirements over the course of 6 semesters. So people are applying at the same time for the part-time program, but they are, as the full-timers, they apply now. We notify at the end of February and early March, but the part-timers start out in May with that reporting class. And that's the only class they take. They take for essentially 1 class a semester, except for when they are taking, I forgot to mention, the law class, which is an incredible class, especially in a digital age, that teaches you everything from how not to get sued to the use of copyright and so forth, and pretty important lesson to learn. And an ethics class, which, again, in our time is a very fluid, complicated experience as journalists that we try to help guide you through. And so when part-timers take these requirements, the writing module, the image and sound, the seminar and production, they're doing that basically 1 at a time over the course of 2 years.
Could I add a point about the relationship between the MA and the MS to make something clear? If you're interested in studying with Jonathan or any of the MA faculty, each of us on the MA faculty also teach an MS course. For instance, this year I'm teaching the MA in the spring, and in the fall I'm teaching an MS course, and we all do that. When Jonathan's not teaching the MA, he teaches an MS course in memoir writing. I'll teach an MS course in writing about the arts or on criticism. This fall, I'm teaching the reporting class. My colleague Elisa will teach an ethics class for the MS students, or she teaches a class in writing about gender and sexuality for the MS students. So if you're interested in studying with us, but the MA program is not for you, we also teach in the MS.
A number of my part-timers are right now studying with Marguerite Holloway, who, David mentioned earlier, is one of our, top professors, just an amazing teacher and writing coach. And what's interesting is that when students were moving into that writing module from my reporting class this summer, they were sort of a little intimidated and thinking, well, I'm really interested in writing about race and discrimination in the U.S. It's a sort of like one of the themes that one of my students chose coming out of my social justice reporting class. And, we talked about it and realized that within the realm of science writing, you can go in any number of directions. So what I advised him was that, certainly there is something that, is known as environmental racism, and that because we teach a system of storytelling that we refer to as enterprise reporting, meaning we don't hand you these story ideas. We expect you to go out and find them, that you are empowered as a student to follow your passion, to follow your interests, and that these courses are wide open for you to, use your imagination to tell science stories or political stories or even sports reporting, religion, in a way that, tells your reader something about our culture as a nation and as a global community.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. I would like to open it up for questions. We have about 10 minutes. If you can go to the microphone, that'll be great, because remember, we have those that are watching us via live stream. And those that are watching us via live stream, if you have any questions, please do step forward.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hello?
Hi.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, my name is Joseph. I was wondering if you guys could tell us a little bit about the difference between the investigative specialization in the MS and the investigative work that you do in the MA program.
Oh, well, they're very different. You know, the investigative program in the MS degree is open to students who, I mean, I think the essential difference is that students going into our MS program may be undergraduates coming right out of school or people with 15 years or more experience who are missing the investigative tool set, you know, which may involve data, but may also involve, you know, scraping through FOIA requests and the like, but also interviewing in difficult subject areas such as sexual assault and the like. And so, in that regard, when you are in the Stabile program, the Stabile investigative program, you still have to take all of the other requirements, including the writing module, the law class, and even a different seminar and production class apart from Sheila Cornell's investigative seminar and workshop class in the spring. Whereas, you know, as Jane said, you know, the MA program tends to attract more seasoned reporters who have a lot of those basic skills, but are looking to take a deeper dive into subject areas such as business reporting, writing about the arts. In that case, if I may say so, you're taking this deeper dive into sort of an academic investigation of these subject areas and learning from some of the top experts and professors in their field here at Columbia, but outside of the journalism school, in the political science department, in the sciences, in our wonderful arts curriculum here at the university. So that's, in my view, the basic difference.
Go
ahead.
I just want to add something because when, you know, the word investigative, again, is very broad. So the investigative concentration pretty much focuses on, you know, uncovering wrongdoing and something that someone out there wants to hide. So it's this kind of investigative reporting that they do.
I think it is a matter of emphasis. The MA program, the real focus is on one of the 4 concentrations, but in addition, every student takes what we call a skills class that is offered in the first semester on Monday evenings. There are 3 of them. They're taught by amazing journalists from ProPublica and from Wall Street Journal, and it is geared towards helping students who are interested in science or business, et cetera, also understand investigative skills. But the main thing about the MA program is really to focus on the subject areas as opposed to the investigative programs that focus more on investigative data journalism.
Thank you.
If I could add, a focus on subject area does not preclude investigative work. In the MA concentration, for instance, we devote the last 5 weeks of the year to doing an investigative project, breaking the students up into teams. We do that in collaboration with Justin Elliott from ProPublica. And in the arts and culture MA, we've broken some sizable arts stories. We broke the story of the Kushners failing to declare the value of their art collection. And that was a class project done as an investigative project within the arts and culture MA.
There's another angle, too, that you should know about the MA. We haven't talked that much about the thesis project, but the thesis is really the core project of the year. It's comparable to a New Yorker article or Atlantic or Harper's in length and in ambition. You're doing an immersive piece of reporting, and many people haven't had the opportunity to do that before. Some are interested in doing investigative stories, And I've been the advisor of students who really wanted to do an investigative story. I'm not an investigative reporter myself, so I team up with Justin Elliott, and we co-advise. And some amazing investigative stories have come out of the MA Science program that way, through kind of collaborative tutoring and teaching and mentoring. So there's that opportunity also.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, my name is Will Fewer. I'm a technology reporter for CNBC. I think this question is probably best suited for Janina. I know that you are here to speak specifically about the data journalism program, but I'm wondering if you can shed some light on the dual degree program. Specifically, I'm wondering both what level of competence with CS is expected of an applicant, as well as specifically what languages and things like that would be learned. I looked at the curriculum, but it was more thematic, I felt, and I'm wondering if you can speak about the steps that actually get there.
Sure, thank you. The data journalism degree and the dual degree are very different. In the dual degree, you're expected to, it's a 2-year program, and basically what you do is journalism, MS in journalism, and also in addition to that, computer science. So they are separate. I mean, there are some classes that sort of cover the intersection of technology and journalism, but it's not like the data journalism program where we fully integrate the two subjects. In terms of the length, the data journalism program is a 3-semester degree, and the computer and the dual degree is a 2-year program. The profile, what are people doing after they graduate in both programs? So what we see is that dual degree people can become developers and they work for tech companies, Google or any other companies. Some of them also somehow work in journalism, but it's more technological than the data program. In the data journalism degree, most of our students are, for instance, last year we had the first class. They're all working for different organizations such as the Washington Post, what else? The Marshall Project. A couple of our graduates are doing amazing data journalism pieces in ProPublica as well. So there's some people think that data is the future, but it's not really like that. It's the present. And there's not just here in New York, but all over the world. There's a need for people who can, approach data and integrate it into different kinds of journalism, not necessarily investigative reporting. Some people use data to cover sports in a different way, or entertainment. So data it doesn't limit, the kind of work that you could do. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, with that, thank you so much to our faculty members for taking the time to be with us. This is the beginning of a conversation. We will have 2 other information sessions as well as webinars coming up, and we will be inviting you to those. So with that said, thank you, and I would like to invite our student panel as well as Christine Souders to step forward. Oh, yes. Thank you. Elena was just saying that you can find their contact information in the faculty page, and they'll welcome your questions about the program.
Fantastic. I think David, you said where you want, and David will put your place card by your name. Okay. Or by you. We'll wait just a minute while David is changing the name cards here. If anybody has any questions that they would like to ask right now, just in general, or if you're hungry, one of the first rules of being a student at Columbia Journalism School is eat.
All the free food you can get.
So please, you're welcome to, if you would like some breakfast, some coffee, tea, or juice, please help yourselves at any time. And for those of you who are on the live stream, I'm sorry that we can't offer you sustenance directly, but I hope that some of what we're saying this morning will do the trick for you in that way. Okay, what I'd like to do now is start with our student panel, but I'm going to start with myself first. I'm Christine Souders, the Associate Dean for Admission and Financial Aid. And again, I am really happy to welcome all of you who are here in the room and also who are on the live stream. We're absolutely delighted to be talking with you. And I think, as Taryn said, we anticipate having a conversation with you that can go on over even a period of years. I think that even our student panelists, and we have one alum also who's with us this morning, will be able to tell you that we correspond very willingly by email, by Skype, in person, by telephone, whatever works best for you. And as Taryn said, we're always here to answer questions. And if we in the admissions office don't have the answers, we will find them for you. So with all of that said, I'm going to turn things over to our student panel. And they're going to talk with you about life here. Our alum who has graciously agreed to be here is also going to talk with you about life after journalism school. So I'm just going to have them each start and take it away.
Thank you, Christine. Hi, my name is Vidya. I'm from the MA Business concentration as part of the class of 2020. I've been in New York for a little over a month. Before this, I was a working journalist in India. I worked in Mint and Hindustan Times, which I would like to believe are two of the best newsrooms in the country. My coverage has been focused on technology and a lot of, breaking news and feature stories around companies like Facebook and WhatsApp and Twitter. I'm here because I want to kind of just take a deep dive into covering labor markets, poverty, what it means to be, covering the central banks, things like that. And I think this course is ideal in getting that sort of deeper understanding of these topics, especially in times where the US economy might just go into a recession or not. So we're still trying to figure that out, but we are the recession class, as our professor Winnie O'Kelly likes to tell us. And very happy to be here and answer any questions that any of you might have. Thank you.
Hi, so my name is Tay. I am an MS student. I am very new to journalism. Up until, I guess, about 7 weeks ago, I was working in Tokyo as a singer, an actor, and performer. So the world of journalism is very new to me, but I'm learning a lot, deep in the thick of it, in my reporting class. We've got our final pitch due later today, so I'm going to have to go and do that. And so far it's been a really, really wonderful experience. The professors almost function as editors, and the reporting class is basically a newsroom. And even though my professors both work at CNN full-time, they are available kind of almost on a minute's notice and will give me 15 minutes of their time to chat on the phone about a pitch or a story that isn't going the way I expected it to. I'm really interested in audio and in podcasting, so eventually into the next module I'll be focusing more on that, and my master's project will be, in the podcast spectrum of things. And again, if you have any questions, please ask.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Pichani, and I am the alum. I graduated in May, and now I'm working here at the J School downstairs in the basement with one of the fellowship programs, which we'll probably talk about. They're special opportunities that Columbia J School offers after graduation. And I was an MS student, and I did the Stabile program, which is the particularly investigative track, which doesn't mean that you don't get investigative techniques when you're an MS student, as they explained earlier, but it's a particular concentration. And I'd say there was about 20 of us last year or so, so it's a select group and class. And yeah, that was a large part of my experience. And then now I'm here with one of the investigative fellowships, and I'm working on a project that was actually something I helped out with last year while I was a student as well, and kind of did my master's thesis based off of it. We're doing a project in partnership with ProPublica. Hopefully it'll be out soon. You can read it. But it's about sexual assault that occurs off of online dating apps and websites. And that was a really great experience. I think I learned almost as much or more from working on that project last year as the J School classes, so that was great. And just to echo what was already said, I even brought business cards, so if you have questions later, you can ask me away. I'm more than happy to tell you off record and on record answers. No, really, I'm willing to tell you anything. So yeah, feel free to ask any questions about the program. Happy to help.
Great, thank you all very much. Perhaps you could talk a little bit about sort of the process that you went through as you were thinking about whether to go to graduate school in journalism, whether journalism was the right place for you, and how you felt about where the field is. Because I know people also have questions in their mind, because there's a big deal made in the media about whether journalism is a dying field, that sort of thing. I think our experience here is something opposite, but I'd like to hear you all just talk about the process you went through as you were making your decisions about applying.
I'd love to start with that. My experience before J School was that I'm from outside of Philadelphia and then lived in Philly. I went to undergrad at the University of Pennsylvania, and they don't have a journalism major, but they had a minor. So I did that, but it was kind of in the background. I also majored in English and psych, and was just one of those people who was like, I love everything, I don't know what to do. And I edited a feminist literary magazine while I was there as well, and journalism was always something I found important, but I had all these other interests. And then after graduation, I helped an old professor copy edit one of her books, and found it really rewarding. It's called I Hear My People Singing, Voices of African American Princeton. It was this oral history project she'd been working on for like 20 years, and kind of fact-checking, I guess, or like trying to flag any little wrong dates or whatever. It just felt like a rewarding project. And then for me, I guess kind of maybe this is a cliche answer, but I feel like during the election was kind of around when I was starting to think about what I wanted to do with my life. And I was thinking about academia because I just love literature. Like just love studying. But nothing wrong with academia. I think it's so great. But I think what did it for me was that it can be a little bit insular, and I wanted to have like a public good behind the work, sort of like, I mean, I guess journalism is a public service in some way, I guess. It's more on ground with people in all walks of life, and you're talking to the general public, versus sometimes it feels like academia talks within itself. So anyway, wanted to do some social justice reporting, and then as far as grad school, I just like had a couple tools in my belt, but like I really wanted to be able to sharpen them and learn investigative techniques and learn, hey, if I wanted to do a podcast, or like how do I use a video camera. And I think actually now more than ever, grad schools can be really helpful for journalism, because a lot of that level of teaching that you used to get maybe 15 years ago in a newsroom, where you had extra editors or like mentors that could hold your hand and walk you through and teach you stuff, a lot of that's been cut out, sadly, of newsrooms. So you're not if you're lucky, you'll find someone to help you out and teach those techniques. But I think now grad school can step in and kind of beef up some of those skills. And it gives you like a fantastic community. Like, that was a long answer, but that is what kind of pushed me towards journalism, and I'm so happy that I did it. I don't regret anything. So,
Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay.
Sure. So again, I didn't have much journalism experience. I'm a career changer, and I actually hadn't lived in America for well over a decade. I'm a dual American-Canadian citizen, so I'd gone to do my undergrad in theater in Toronto, and then ended up in Tokyo doing performing stuff. And I kind of, while I was in Japan, became really interested, almost surrounded myself with podcasts and with audio as a way of kind of staying connected, and really fell in love with the storytelling nature of that. And I've always been really interested in storytelling, hence my background in theater and as a vocalist. So I knew I wanted to pivot in that direction. And about a year ago, around this time, I was in New York for a wedding. And I literally walked in off the street and met with Taryn, and kind of felt like I had to make this happen one way or the other. So yeah, started working on my application almost immediately on the bus ride to the wedding. I was typing away. And yeah, through a lot of generosity from the staff here and from people in my life, made it happen. And yeah, learning sort of how to do this. It's exciting.
Could I just ask, Tay, did you give any consideration to doing an MFA as opposed to a journalism degree? Because I know there are a lot of people who are looking at both, looking at creative writing, nonfiction writing courses, that sort of thing, versus journalism.
Yeah, I've wanted to come back to school for a while, and I was trying to figure out exactly what I wanted to do in that capacity, and I feel like some of the skills that I acquired in my undergrad and from my work after school would fill in some of the gaps of a podcast, but I tried to make my own stuff along the way, and it didn't really go as planned. And what I was fundamentally missing was the reporting skills. And I felt like I really needed that, so I applied to a number of different programs for journalism and was very lucky to get in here and manage to make it work. But yeah, I felt like ever since that day last October when I walked in here into the Pulitzer Hall, I thought, this is where I want to be, and I'm going to do whatever I can to make that happen.
Thank you. Vidya.
I'm a little bit different from this panel because I'm not an American citizen. I'm an international student. So for me, I think this grad school experience is more like a life lesson. I feel like I'm learning so much more beyond just what I learn at school every day. As far as the process is concerned, I have to be honest, I was thinking and considering J school for about 3-4 years before I actually applied. Last year we ended the election cycle. India had a major election in 2019, and I just wanted to sort of step out and see what else is out there. But unlike Tay, I didn't apply like way in advance. I started my application process in December, and I was very close to deadline when I actually, put in my application. I guess, I did reach out to a lot of alum from the MA Business course, but I also told myself that I don't want to talk to too many people, so that, you can get confused if you're all over the place anyway, which I tend to be sometimes, and I tend to ramble, which I may be doing right now. But I have to say that ever since I've come here, I've learned so much about how to cover poverty, how to cover a recession, how do you look at central banks. Yesterday, for instance, we were at the Bank of America, just trying to quickly understand and assimilate the September US unemployment data and what that means for the US economy. So, these are things, and these are real-time experiences, which are very, very different from covering a Facebook or a Twitter, and these are things that I now am adding to my skill sets and hopefully will help me in my thesis, which I am still working on, trying to figure out a topic and things like that. So, yeah.
One of the things that you would find here is that everyone is on deadline. It doesn't matter what they're doing, they're on deadline. Students, faculty, staff, everybody. What I'd like to do now, because I'm mindful of our time here, I know that people usually have a lot of questions for our student and alumni panelists. So I would like to invite you to bring your questions to the microphone. And for those of you who are watching on the live stream, if you would like to type your questions in, my colleague Ross is feverishly writing them down so that we'll be able to pose them for you. I know this is a group of journalists. Happy to have your questions about any of the programs that we offer.
Hi, my name is Gabe, and this question is directed to Elizabeth. Thank you for all of you being here. I was wondering if you could talk more about the postgraduate fellowship program that you're involved in and how Columbia Journalism School prepared you to take on that role, and if you could talk more about that application process for yourself.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Gabe. So correct me if I get anything wrong, but Columbia has these postgraduate fellowships, and they're really unique opportunities for students to apply, and they're select for Columbia students. So you can't apply if you're outside of Columbia. And there's an investigative fellowship, which right now is 5 of us. Me and my partner are working on this project, and then there's a team of 3 others who are currently working on a climate change investigative project that has to do with the public health consequences of climate change, really deep dive into data and whatnot. And that program, Investigative Fellowships, is a really, I feel like this sounds like a PR pitch, but it's true. It really is a unique opportunity because the director will kind of hold your hand through, if you don't know how to do something, she'll help you out. And you can really, you don't feel, it's still a learning opportunity. You don't feel like you're in a newsroom pressure where you might look bad if you ask a question, but you're still working on projects that are going to go to places like ProPublica, which is great. I don't know if I'd ever be like working on a project for ProPublica without J School. I'm also doing something for them. I don't know if you're familiar with Trump Town, but we're working on some of that stuff for ProPublica. And then there's a fellowship for gender and migration, where they focus on a topic that has to do in the realm of gender migration. And then there's another one that's cross borders. So a very data-centric, again, look at some type of topic that has to do more internationally. I think they're working on refugee children, but I could be wrong. So there's probably about, I don't know, 10 spots total. As far as the application process, I'm kind of a unique situation where I was working on this dating app project as a Stabile student last year, and then they needed help on finishing it. So, and my master's thesis was tied to a topic off of that. So I kind of transitioned just after graduation right into the project, but I think it's a pretty standard application where towards the end of, it's actually pretty late in the year, but towards the end of the year, they'll have panels and talk more specific about it, but kind of your standard resume, maybe an idea or two, and yeah.
And I'll also just mention that my colleague Gina Bubian from the Career Development Office will also be able to talk a little bit more about the postgraduate fellowship opportunities. Yeah, thank you. Other questions? You guys, you're going to give me a heart attack. It can't be possible. It can't be possible. Oh, thank you.
Hi.
You can just pull the microphone down towards you.
This is another question for Elizabeth. But what did you gain from the Stabile program, and how do you think it differs from just taking the investigative journalism class through the MS program?
I think that's a really good question. So just from what my friends have told me, they have had some great investigative techniques class where I was like, dang, you kind of learned as much as we did in Stabile. So I was thinking about it earlier when the professors were speaking, and I think the difference might be you'll still learn investigative technique, so how to use PACER and look at lawsuits, but your thesis for Stabile is going to be much more of a deep dive into an investigative project first off, so your master's thesis is definitely going to be investigative. And it's throughout the course of the year. I think this word was used earlier, but it really is about wrongdoing. you can use investigative techniques to just find a lawsuit nobody's looked at before. Like I took writing about the arts as well, which is another great thing about J School is you can have these like weird other interests. Like I was doing investigative stuff, but I also love the arts, so I took an arts class. And I used a lawsuit for one of my papers in that class. But that's like the techniques, and then Stabile, I think, is really about finding some wrongdoing. That's a big buzzword used a lot in the class, but it's trying to uncover like pretty intentional wrongdoing by a company or a person or a system. So yeah, hope that makes sense. And of course your master's thesis is very centered on being an investigation. So you start a little bit earlier, and your thesis for the other MS track doesn't have to be investigative.
Thank you.
Hi. My name's
pull the mic
I know,
down
I'm
towards
short.
you.
This is just terrible. So my question is for all of you. I'm wondering about the application process itself into the program. If you could talk about, the writing samples that you provided or the writing test. I'm not quite sure what exactly that's about. That'd be great. Thank you.
Do you want me to start?
Go for it, yeah.
So I think the writing process will be different for everybody. It's going to be a very individual experience, depends on your background. If you are a working journalist, obviously you have a whole bunch of working writing samples that you can use from your published library of work. For me, it was, I have to say, difficult. And when I look back now in retrospect, I feel like I should have used a completely different set of work samples that I actually submitted. But I think I got lucky, and I think both things worked in my favor. But going forward, when I now speak to career services, I have a completely different take on the kind of stories I'd like to, sort of really focus on in terms of putting them out there as work samples or reference materials, to give an insight into the kind of journalist I am or the kind of work I'd like to do in the future.
Yeah, I think all of you, by being here today, that's a really good start. So
Pay him to say that.
I know that during the application process, I made a point of trying to attend as much as I could. Obviously, I was in Tokyo, so that sometimes required me waking up at like 2 o'clock in the morning to watch a webinar. And I got, yeah, you probably did that too. Trying to just gather little bits and pieces from all of these sort of wonderful things that people like Christine offer. And then in terms of the writing test, I would say try to look at the news. Obviously, you want to be following the news as much as you can. That's sort of an important part of the writing test. But on top of that, think about what the reporter is doing in that situation, how they are covering that topic or that particular event, and how you might do it differently, or how they're succeeding, how they're failing. Think about the news not just as a series of events, but as a journalist would think about it. Like, who would you talk to? How would you cover it? What angles would you look at, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you. We've got 2 more people here with questions. I've also got 2 questions from the live stream about the application process and about outside scholarships. I'm going to answer those questions a little bit later in the program, but please go ahead.
All right, good morning. My name's Cheyenne. My questions are actually for Tay. One is directed at Tay and the other is directed at Vidya. Tay, I wanted to know, what was that first reporting class like? They were talking about how in May you start with that first reporting class, you're on the ground, you're talking to people, and I wanted to know what that was like for you, kind of, being brand new to journalism. And then for Vidya, I wanted to know about the business concentration. Are there kind of even more specialized concentrations even within that? Like, can you focus on business and data ethics, or something like, international businesses or currencies? So those are my questions.
Great. So I'm a full-time student, but I think the part-time students start in May, but I started just maybe 7 weeks ago now, and it's very much like shoe leather reporting. I'm on an area beat, so I go out to Queens and just talk to as many people as I possibly can to try to suss out what's going on in that neighborhood. It's very intense. Even though it's only been 7 weeks, it feels like it's been maybe 7 years. I've said a couple of times now that the fabric of space-time has been stretched by the weight of all that I don't know. So I'm very much learning on a day-to-day basis. And you really, I think in a reporting class, you learn by doing. So I might not know how to do a story or an assignment when it's assigned, or even necessarily while I'm doing it, but by the time I've finished an assignment, I feel like I've gotten a much better grasp of what was expected of me and what I can do again with that type of project in the future.
Vidya.
Great. Thank you for your question. So I think the MA Business program is designed in a way that it wants you to focus on certain important aspects of business reporting just in the first semester. So we have classes like accounting. We have the graduate seminar, which focuses on business and economics. We have evidence and inference, and the MA Essentials, which is essentially an investigative class with Ken Brown from the Wall Street Journal and a bunch of other people from ProPublica. Depending on your interests, I think you can pick which investigative editor you'd like to really sort of, whose classes you really want to attend. I think it becomes more fluid probably closer to the spring semester where, you can pick your own electives. We were given accounting this time, which I think has been the best revelation for me because I love our accounting professor. We take the classes at SIPA and he performs accounting. I'm not joking. Like he's an amazing, amazing professor. It's become one of my favorite classes, and I've never ever studied accounting before this. So I think you should go with the J School, let them lead you into the first semester and kind of, I mean, if you have any specific interests, I think all the professors, like Tay said, they're all editors, so they can totally help you in terms of understanding a specific thing, give you readings that you might want to, look up and, sort of add to your knowledge base. I don't know if that answers your question, but I tried.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nora Hogan. First off, thank you guys for being here and providing a lot of insights today. This is a question for all of you. In what ways do you think the classes you've taken here are addressing the shifting technological advances and the shifts in the way that we are consuming media, particularly news, in our society?
Pretty big question. I guess technologically, I mean, everything's available here from audio and video. I took a video class and think I learned more about I thought I'd learned about the camera and all that stuff, which I did, but I think I learned more about reporting in that video class because if you can get people on camera to talk to you and, it takes more time, you're probably going to do pretty well with pen and paper. It's different, and they're both admirable, but that was a really fun experience for me because I didn't pick up a video camera before that. So data also is they said earlier, is the present, not just the future. So the school's addressing that, and I think it is very up to date and current with the landscape. It's not like you have professors out of the game for the last 10 years because really even the last 2 years things will be changing. So it's really cool that a lot of the teachers here they're still very much embedded in journalism themselves. They're not just theoretically talking about it anymore. So and then I can't remember the second part of your question, the shifting landscape of journalism. The way we consume media. Yeah, I guess that's kind of related to podcasts and video and whatnot now. But also you get to take in the MS program anyway, an ethics class, a law class, and a business class that I actually really liked because I don't know if I would have thought about that just in a newsroom. Ethically, what's the consumption of this article mean for the general public? And really starting to think about the ethics behind journalism and business-wise, how are we going to do the new frontier rather than just relying on advertisements? What's journalism going to look like? So I'd say it's pretty up to date.
Yeah, I mean, I think this came up in a lecture a couple weeks ago, but we talked about how the journalism school has been here for 100 years of journalism, and journalism has changed a lot since then. Even my reporting professors both attended Columbia about 15, 20 years ago. I think even beyond that, into the 80s. And at a certain point, like, there were just typewriters. We didn't have sort of the digital platforms that we have now, but I think from what I've experienced in these 7 weeks so far, the journalism school is very much trying to be on the cutting edge of journalism and technology. And if you want to learn about something, there is absolutely an opportunity to learn about it.
Yeah, just to add, the MA business course is also, every topic and every class that we attend is by a working editor. So you, in terms of coverage or what to cover that matters the most is of utmost importance. And we're always on our screens. We're encouraged to tweet. We're encouraged to take, we have a 1-credit skills class. So whether it's podcasts for audio or whether you want to take a video class or a photo class, those are things that are given to us aside of the academic deep dive that we're going to be doing. So all the courses, I think, address the technological bit. As far as consumption is concerned, I think if you're a millennial, you're going to be consuming it on social media a lot more and on your mobile a lot more than perhaps a newspaper or even television nowadays. So I'm hoping that you'd probably read us at some point in all of these places.
Can I add something really important to that, though? Actually, is sort of what doesn't change. Like, I think it arms you with the foundation of storytelling that is so much more important almost. Like, things are going to be shifting about whether, in 10 years of who likes podcasts or videos or whatever. But you really do learn, like, I had a professor describe kind of, I don't know, it's sort of like everyone's going this way when a big news story breaks. Like, how are you going to go this way? And or find a different angle to it. And that is a skill that is very important and hard to learn, because as people are going to be able to consume from all different platforms, what's going to make your story stand out or different or unique? And like that type of sort of headspace is something J School will teach you, which I think is like more valuable than how it's going to be consumed in a way. And that was really hard and interesting to learn, I think.
Great, thank you. We'll take one question. You've got 1 minute.
Okay. My name is Audrey Carlton. I'm a freelancer actually based in Toronto. And I'm wondering, this is kind of a similar question, but I'm wondering how you feel like, or if you feel like the program prepared you for the precarity of the industry and the inevitability of freelancing.
For sure. I guess since I've been there. I have friends that are freelancing. A lot of them have pretty stable jobs, thankfully, right now. But I think that like freelancing is a skill you want to be able to have even if you're at a news organization and want to do something that maybe your organization's not backing. I think that's like one of the main things about benefits of J School is that you're going to be able to have all the techniques to then be able to create your own stories or look for your own stories and figure out, like I kind of said again, everyone's looking at how are you going to approach that in a different angle, and that's like so key to freelancing and make your pitch more desirable than all the other pitches they're probably getting about the same topic. Actually, that's another thing J School really helped with too, is like making a really good pitch and figuring out how that's going to be read in an editor's inbox is really valuable. God bless freelance's ability to be disciplined. I don't know if I could do it in a way. I think that's a real skill to have, but you also will learn how to use free like public available records and free databases, and I think that's pretty cool because if you land in a newsroom with a small budget, or if you're not in a newsroom at all, I think you'll still definitely have the tools to be able to crank out some really great stories and even investigations.
Great. Vidya, Tay, Elizabeth, thank you so, so much. And now we're going to, go ahead, please. Now we're going to move on to my colleague Gina Bubian, who is the director of the Career Development Office. And she actually, I think, is going to have some also very interesting things to say that will address some of these very last questions. Gina.
While we're not waiting anymore, I want to expand this. Okay. I'm Gina Boubian, Director of the Career Office, and it's nice to see all of you today. And I wanted to just answer a couple questions that were thrown out. As far as classes that you take, who asked that question? Cheyenne, like exact class. I really recommend that you look at the curriculum and read the course descriptions and get an idea of what you'll actually be taking. And then if you're thinking of other journalism schools, do the same thing at those schools, because then you'll get a real flavor for the differences between our programs and what you'll be learning. And then apply it to the schools where the curriculum most excites you. That would be the first thing. And then Gabe asked a question. What was your question again? I had thoughts about it, and then. Oh, yes. Okay. So we've got, there are probably about 40 different jobs and internships, or I should say internships and fellowships that students can apply for and it happens in the second semester. The deadline is in February, and we prepare you for these opportunities. You'll be able to hear from the professors who run them, and you'll be able to hear from the editors. And these are not just based at the J School. There are a bunch of positions that are based outside the J School at companies like Frontline and ABC News, where we have organized a relationship, and we've sort of hammered out a fellowship with a company. And these are also really competitive. But the good thing is you're only competing with each other, so it's a smaller pool, but these are really terrific opportunities to sort of get started at a really big news organization in a fellowship or internship sort of capacity. And when we talk about internships, they're always paid opportunities. The day of unpaid internships, thankfully, is kind of gone. Our students don't do them. So that's the first thing I want to say, because international students often think that an internship means a 2-week-long stint in a newsroom where you're bringing coffee to people and sweeping the floor perhaps, and you're not being paid. That does not happen here. So these are paid positions. So let me just get started with careers, what people definitely want to know about. So we have a small but very committed team in the career office. We're all made of former journalists, and so we know how to talk to editors, and we know what editors are looking for, and we use our sort of knowledge to help advise you. You students who come to the J School get one-on-one advising, and then we put on a huge job fair in the spring, which is the biggest job fair in the country that everybody attends. So first, a reality check. No matter where you go to grad school, there's no, and here as well, there's no guarantee that there's going to be a job for you at the end of the year, because when we don't know what the economy will be doing in May 2019 or May 2020. Or not 19, that already happened. We actually do know what happened then. 2020 and 21 is when you would be here. We don't know which companies will be biting the dust. We don't know which companies will rise from the ashes and reinvent themselves. We don't know what kind of new platforms will be invented. We don't know what new job titles and actual jobs will sprout. It keeps changing. It's a really dynamic and exciting time to get into the business. So one thing we do know is that our students definitely do well in the job market and get really good jobs and end up on a sort of intractable, sort of an inexorable upward climb after they leave the J School. So I'd like to show you now some statistics from the class of 2019 that just graduated. So you have sort of a better picture of how our students do. So out of last year's class, 77% of the class had something lined up at graduation, which was a little bit higher than usual. Usually we've seen a range of 71 to 75% for the last 8 or 9 years, and last year it was a tiny bit better than that. We don't get too excited about a percent here and there, just because you never know what's going to happen the next year. But what this means is this is as of graduation, and this is an important point for me to make, because a lot of sites or schools should, or they do, or they should be posting employment data on their websites, and you should be looking at that data and interrogating that data. And the things you want to know is when is the information collected, and what percentage of the class is in that in that data, and that's important information for you. So our information is basically 100% of the class, 99% possibly, and it's taken as of graduation. And the reason why is because we actually give out graduation tickets to students and their families as long as they answer a bunch of questions about what they're doing after graduation. So that's how we get 100% an answer. And we also feel like this is an industry where it isn't all that comforting or helpful to students to know that a year after graduation, 100% of the class will be employed. We feel like you want to know what's happening as of graduation. Throughout the summertime, students continue to land, and even they're continuing to get to find positions now. And students are continuing to get back to us and let us know that their internship has been converted to a job, or they've gone to a second fellowship, or something else is happening. So it's a number that changes almost as soon as we discover it. This is a little bit hard to see because it's so bright in here, but this is a pie chart that shows you how these jobs divide up. Internships, full-time jobs, part-time jobs. There's a good group of students who continue on into another academic program after Columbia, like they go to SEPA or they go to business school. This happens every year. There's a small group, but a very committed group that want to be full-time freelancers to the student who asked in the back. And freelancing is sort of precarious financially, but there are definitely students who love it, love the lifestyle, and want to be in control of the stories that they write. So that's always going to be a small little sliver of the pie. The red slice is students who, as of graduation, hadn't landed. But this is a segment of the pie that shrinks throughout the summer. I want you to notice that the big blue slice at the bottom is the internship slice, and this is something that you need to know. It's the biggest sort of piece of the pie, and this is not particular to Columbia. It's something that has been true the entire time I've been here, which is 13 years, and it was true when I got out of graduate school 30 years ago, that internships are sort of the first step after you finish with journalism school, even at the graduate level, because this industry here in the United States is one that has a vibrant sort of internship path where it's like a job tryout. I mean, if you're in college, it's not so much of a job tryout, it's just a good work experience. But if you're a grad student and you're going to be finished with school, it does become more of a job tryout because you're available to be hired in August when it's over. And so we like internships. Our students like internships. It's your chance to sort of leap to a much bigger news organization that you may not have had access to before J School. I want to now show you, and now that I can see the lighting in here, it's going to be really hard to see this, so I'll explain it to you. When we, at the end of the year, as I mentioned, we asked students to fill out this big questionnaire. We asked them, what is the main thing that you have been hired to do? And the majority of students say, text reporting and editing, reporting and writing, basically. And there was a student who asked about, adapting to the current needs of the market. And it's important for you to understand that this is sort of the main thing that you learn here when you're at the journalism school, which is how to be a reporter. And it doesn't matter what platform you're working for, which I find really interesting. I mean, this statistic of more than half the students getting hired to be reporters and editors means these students are at newspapers, they're at websites, they're at digital-only sites, they're at broadcast stations, and they're still telling us that they've been mainly hired to be a reporter. Audio and video production is in second place, and that's also a piece of the pie that's growing because there's a big explosion going on in the podcast world, which is really exciting. Okay, this is a fun chart, and I can see that I chose the wrong colors. Once again, it's too bright in here for you to see, but this is basically showing the distribution amongst the different platforms amongst our students. So basically, you're looking, the line that's at the the yellow line at the very top, I think you can see it. That's the percentage of jobs that are only in a purely digital platform. And we did see a plunge last year. We don't know what that means. We don't know if it's a beginning of a trend. We have to wait to see what happens this year. So as a result, it kind of, that plunge kind of messes up the rest of the graph. There's 3 lines at the top there, yellow, brownish, and orange. That represents broadcast, newspaper, and digital only, plus online staffs of broadcast and newspapers, and that's where about 80% of our students go after graduation. So that's kind of the takeaway. The green line at the bottom is the magazine trajectory, and this should not surprise anybody. This is over a 10-year period that we've seen far fewer jobs and internships in the magazine world, and it's because digital-only sites have popped up that sort of satisfy a student's desire to write voicey, authoritative, sort of magazine-style writing. And also, frankly, the magazine world was sort of quick to understand how important it was to jump onto digital, and they have suffered for it. The line at the bottom is wire services, which this is sort of a healthy 10% of the class every year that goes to Bloomberg, Reuters, Agence France Presse, AP, I'm leaving something out, Wall Street Journal, those are the biggies. And these are jobs that take you abroad oftentimes, and they're also jobs that are in business reporting oftentimes. So that's sort of an exciting trajectory for some people. Okay. The strength of the Columbia brand and the talent of the students here and the access that students have to the major media companies is such that certain companies like to hire a whole bunch of J-School grads at the end of every year. And this is showing you, as of June, how many students from the class of 2019 went to these companies, these specific companies. And I know, at least for CNN, by August, they had hired a dozen people from the class of 2019, which, when you think about it, it's like 3 or 4% of the entire class going to CNN. These are mostly internships that lead to the next thing, or their fellowships. And when I say internships, we're talking summer, we're talking like 10-week at the minimum to 6 months or a year positions. Okay. Let's talk about pay. Why not? Okay. Pay is not so great in journalism in the beginning, but here's where it stands now. The minimum wage currently is $15 an hour in New York City. That happened as of December 2018, and that's going to be the low in this area. There are some states where the minimum wage is lower. But again, we're talking internship pay, and internships are temporary. You have to remember, you will get something better at the end, with the typical pay ranging from a low of $600 to the high of $1,200. It just depends. There are some companies that have really good internship pay. I don't think anybody took an unpaid internship out of last year's class. When that happens, it's usually like 1 or 2 people out of the entire class, and they do it because that particular place, typically a magazine, is their absolute favorite magazine on earth, and they turn down paid situations in order to do the unpaid internship. But that said, I don't think anybody took an unpaid internship out of last year's class. It's just not necessary, especially with the economy as healthy as it is right now. Full-time jobs, you're looking at the range there of 35 to about 60, and we've seen a return of benefits being offered, which is really nice. When I got into this, when I arrived at Columbia 13 years ago, we heard of a lot of students taking jobs and internships that didn't come with benefits, and that was really sad, and now we're seeing benefits offered. And the high was pretty high, but that's going to be a pretty seasoned business reporter who's already had some years under their belt. Okay, the expo. Every spring we put on a huge career expo. There's a little video on the career site that you can watch. It was pretty fantastic. This last year we had 336 recruiters, when I say recruiters, I'm talking editors, producers, reporters, and then hiring people from the HR side of these companies, came to interview our students. And the recruiters outnumbered the students, which was pretty exciting. And it made for a really busy day and a very packed day, and a lot of jobs and internships and freelance deals and masters getting sold happened at the expo. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It doesn't happen anywhere else. No other school, no other organization pulls this off. And we benefit, like I said, from the brand of the J School, the quality of the students, the training that that editors know they're going to find here, and the fact that we're in the media capital of the world. It's like it's an easy commute for a lot of people to come spend Saturday with us. Okay, no matter where you want to work, I suggest you go on LinkedIn and just do a little Google searching or do a little LinkedIn searching. Enter the state where you want to live or enter the country where you want to live and see how many J School students are there. There's a Columbia Journalism School LinkedIn page with an alumni button, and that's where you want to go to sort of explore, see how many people are at USA Today or BuzzFeed, and just get a sense, and do that for other schools. So our school has a lot of reach. The alumni network is formidable and loyal, and that's another thing that brings students to Columbia. It's the alumni network. Now I would like to take a couple minutes to to specifically address the international candidates that might be in this room. Is there anybody here from outside the U.S.? Okay. So I'll be perfectly honest. Due to the political climate that's currently sort of anti-immigrant in this country, I feel like international students come to the J School with a lot of anxiety, and I want to just show you a graphic that ought to allay your concerns. So this is this is comparing U.S. permanent residents and international students, their employment sort of trajectory at graduation, and as you can see, it's kind of even-steven, sort of much like every single year. Sometimes the international students do a tiny bit better, sometimes they do a tiny bit worse, but overall, it's usually the international students and the U.S. Green card holders are within a 1% or 2% of each other every single year. So we've never really focused on it so much because it really is sort of such a close sort of a closely matched two groups, but we decided to just see what it looks like in a graph because of what's been happening in the news, so that you can see that little sort of spread at the end. That was the first spring after the current administration was in office, and there was a lot of anti-immigrants rhetoric and policies being talked about, and it was kind of a wild year. I do want to say that, so I think that Taryn Almanzar will talk about this later, but all international students do get an OPT after graduation. It's a 1-year work visa, basically, and this is an extension of your visa, and it entitles you to work legally in the U.S. for a year. And most of our international students do apply for OPT. There's a couple things that you ought to know, that once you're at Columbia, you're not actually allowed to earn any money while you're in student status, and what that means is you can't freelance either for money. You're not allowed to freelance and make any money. So this is something that you need to know coming in, because every year we say this to international students, but then they're surprised when they arrive. And I want you to understand that even if you're not getting stuff published, international students still do really well in the job market coming out of Columbia. It's very unusual and infrequent for a student to actually be sponsored full-time at the end of their OPT year. So most students, if you do come to Columbia from out of the state, you should sort of assume that you will eventually go home. After a year. There are some companies that do sponsor, and they are typically in the business journalism world, like Reuters, Bloomberg, the Wall Street Journal. These are companies that will sometimes sponsor, but the majority of students will just end up leaving the U.S. after the year. And there's many different kinds of visas that are out there, and if there's a lot of information here once you get here. But if you are interested in that, the ISSO office, International Students and Scholars Office, is a big office at Columbia that helps all the international students, and they have a lot of really good information on their website. Okay, let me I just thought it would be fun to show you some stories of recent grads. Julia was a student that graduated in May, and I just like sort of roaming around the web and looking on main websites of major newspapers and websites to see if I recognize the name of a student, and I usually do, so I just grabbed this one. Julia was somebody who came to the J School from Williams College, and she only had one internship under her belt, and she got hired by the LA Times after this last summer. And she was there covering the earthquake. They sent her to Gilroy to do some local color on that shooting at the Gilroy Garlic Festival. And so I took a screenshot of one of those stories just to show you the kinds of work that our students do right after graduation. At the end of that internship, they wanted her to stay, but she wanted to return to the East Coast, and now she's at CNN in the Washington Bureau. This is a student who came directly from Morehouse College, and he was the editor-in-chief of the paper at Morehouse. I think it's called the Maroon Tiger. And he went to the Miami Herald in a full-time job after graduation covering breaking news. He was really, really happy to be able to go to the Miami Herald. The Miami Herald is a paper that absolutely loves the journalism school and hires a lot of our people every year as well. This is actually a double byline of two different students who are from different years. Andrew graduated in the class of 2018, and Weha was in this last graduating class, and they were both data concentrators. And so they studied data journalism in their year at Columbia, and they both got hired at the Marshall Project, which is a very high-quality, award-winning website devoted to the coverage of criminal justice. And they're doing a lot of data. There's just tons of data in the world of criminal justice. And so this was a story that they did together. And Weha was hired as a summer intern, and they've kept her for now because she's so good, and they need her skills for some more projects. So I thought it would be helpful also to understand what happens to people after, before Columbia, then at Columbia, and then after Columbia. So I mentioned Julia already, so I won't repeat her trajectory. Samantha was somebody who went to University of Missouri in Columbia, Missouri, and she worked as a business reporter at a small business newspaper after graduation in Missouri. And then she came to Columbia, and now she's a full-time reporter at American Lawyer covering bankruptcy. And that's a job that she was pretty excited about because it sounded like a really hard beat and a fun beat. And she was a Stabile student. Brianna was an intern at Politico. She went to Florida State, and she also had a social media internship at the New York Times before the Politico gig. She came to Columbia, and she was hired as a fact checker, a full-time fact checker with benefits at the New Yorker. The New Yorker came to the expo. 4 editors lined up and interviewed students all day long, and they met Brianna, and they made her an offer. And one of the editors was David Remnick, who showed up. That was exciting. Okay, career changers. We get a lot of people who are career changers, like Tay in the theater world. Erica was a teacher in Indianapolis, and teachers will often arrive at the J School really burning with passion to write about education and income and education inequality and problems in education. And that's what motivated her while she was here. And she is now an education reporter at the Hechinger Report. Pranshu was very well sourced in city government. He worked in city government in New York City. He worked in Philadelphia as well, in the mayor's office. He got an internship at the Philadelphia Inquirer, and at the end of the summer, they offered him a City Hall bureau job at the Inquirer, which is just incredible job. So that's where he is. Paul was at Human Rights Watch as a researcher. Human Rights Watch actually does decent journalism, but it's also an advocacy. It's primarily an advocacy organization, and so that's why I included him. And he got an internship at the Intercept, which is sort of deep dive national security reporting. Then, this is more sort of typical. We have a large group of students who have been working for a bit, and then they come to Columbia, working in journalism, I should say, and then they come to Columbia. Sarah was out at the University of California, Berkeley's newspaper as an opinion writer, so she didn't really have any clips to speak of that were reported, and so she became a fixer in Turkey, but that was not really a living. So she decided to come to Columbia, and she spoke Arabic. She got the graduate traineeship at Reuters, which is a 9-month position, and now she's in the Istanbul Bureau of Reuters, which is really exciting. Alex was, aside from being the editor-in-chief of the Bates paper up in Maine, he had an internship at a small paper in Pennsylvania, and before all this, he thought he'd go into politics and policy, so he also had a couple of congressional aid type of internships in his other summers of college. He came to Columbia and went to the Miami Herald after graduation, and as soon as he arrived at the Miami Herald, his master's project was published on the front page of the New York Times, which was really exciting. I think no one's mentioned the master's projects and the master's thesis. These are these little stories that you have to write in the second semester. They're actually major reporting projects. Every single person here at Columbia has to write one of these, like a major project. The MS students, it's called a master's project. It's about 5,000 words, and it's a deeply reported story, and you have a specific advisor to help you through that. The MA students have a thesis, which is really just a story as well, but it's even longer. It's like an 8,000-word, deeply reported story of your choosing. So just get that out of the way. Everybody has to do a master's project. When I meet an alum who's been out for 20 years, they can tell me what their master's project was about. It's a really big idea, and people are very, very proud of their stories. Okay, Heather was a photographer. We don't often have photographers here at the J School, but she really loved photography, and she was really good at it. So she had done a photography internship in Michigan, and she came to Columbia, and then she got the 2-year-long Lenfest Fellowship at the Philadelphia Inquirer, and she's in her second year of that fellowship now. And I just saw that she won some big award for a project that she participated in, a photo project. That's all I had. If I can answer questions, if anybody has questions, if you could just line up and fire away. Yes.
Oops. All right. Hi, my name is Arlene, and I am a millennial with 25 years of seasoning. So, a little spicy. So my question to you is, upon completion of a degree, I'm interested in the part-time master's, very interested in the documentary program in film. What has your experience been in terms of placing some of the more seasoned folks, and knowing that there is ageism out there, we're all going to get there? How have you tackled that? What have your experiences been, and how do you overcome that when trying to place people?
Just to sort of correct the terminology, we don't actually place people. You have to find your own job, but we totally give you so much advice and help. Yes, I do think that there definitely is ageism out there. However, the antidote to that is to be a really good reporter, and so our students everybody gets great training. As far as documentary, that's a world with a lot of small documentary companies around New York City and beyond, and they all have their own niche and specialty, and we have seen students get internships at these small companies. Unfortunately, that's one piece of the journalism industry that doesn't pay well and does have like unpaid stuff going on, unpaid internships, so not a lot of our students do take those jobs. But our documentary, you're talking about the 3-semester documentary program. You work on a documentary during the summer after the school year, and those students are finding jobs in in the broadcast world typically, or in the small documentary company world, or they're seeing their films to completion, or they're returning to their home countries. So it's a little hard to say without knowing a person and you know, seeing where you're coming from, but you know, people do find something. Anybody else?
Hi, I'm C. I noticed that those are kind of aggregate statistics about pay and jobs, and I'm wondering how they differ from the MA versus the MS program, because people have varying levels of experience going into each.
Right. So the MA students as well are also competing for some of the fellowships and internship opportunities, and we advise students to engage in the internship and fellowship, all the deadlines, just as strongly as we advise the MS students to do that, especially for the MA business students. They typically apply for all the internships because those are at the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, Reuters, and those companies sort of require an internship as a cost of entry. The arts and culture students they're typically an incredibly talented group, and for the last couple years, there have been a lot of professional freelancers in that group, and I just got an email from one of them a couple days ago who said that she's still freelancing, but she's writing for better magazines, and she's getting better assignments, and she's getting better pay, and she's fine with that arrangement. So it's to each his own. There's definitely a group of students who come to the J School who really love freelancing. We don't sort of push that life on people because it's sort of it can be precarious financially, but for a small group of people, it's really the preferred way they want to do journalism. So in answer to your question, MA students do also get internships, and it's like the biggest piece of their own pie as well.
But I mean, are they essentially competing for the same jobs post-grad?
Sometimes, yes. So the fellowships that are run out of the J School and the exclusive fellowships, the MAs are incredibly competitive for, and they want those jobs. Like, for instance, this year, both of the frontline year-long fellows are MA students. One's science, one's politics. And those are really good jobs. And they competed against the MS pool, and they got those jobs. But, the year before that, it didn't turn out that way. So, yes, they are competing for some of the same positions. And they're also waiting for full-time job offers too. I mean, there's all these different all these different phases of hiring that happen throughout the year, and the MAs and also the night badges, to be honest, they'll engage in whatever extent you want to engage, throughout the year, applying for stuff, but then after the job fair, the Career Expo, the students will start looking for full-time jobs, and that's when we see some of the MAs finally sort of get really involved in their job search and start looking for full-time jobs. So yes, I mean, the MAs are more inclined to want a full-time job as opposed to an internship. That process takes longer typically, because they require more experience. So yeah, I mean, some of the MAs are getting jobs in the summer, and they're full-time jobs.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Andrew. Would you say that the master's gives added job security? Because I know, like, on the graph, that digital plunge probably had something to do with like HuffPo and Vox Media and BuzzFeed all purging tons of, I think 10% of their newsrooms earlier this year. So it's a very turbulent industry, and I guess one of the big reasons I could think of to come to journalism school is to think that I would be able to navigate that industry with a little more safety.
It feels that way to us too. We saw that, Intercept and Mike, they all had cuts or freezes. But then, for instance, The Intercept began hiring again, in the middle of the summer. So that was a short-lived thing. We were surprised at the expo at how many newspapers showed up. That surprised us. And there were hundreds and hundreds of job openings at newspapers. We didn't see it coming. Every year it's we're so surprised at who shows up. But So there's just so much dynamism in this industry. It's hard to keep track of, and it feels like it's kind of the Wild West sometimes. But I do feel like students who come here get a really good inoculation to sort of protect against these downturns. Our students do really well in the job market.
Thank you.
Hi, Cheyenne again. I wanted to know, is there a difference in terms of the career services that are offered and available to full-time students versus part-time students in terms of advising, coaching, job postings?
Oh, gosh, no. It's all the same group. We try to schedule all of our events and all the guests that come in and editors that come talk to their companies, the workshops that we give about cover letters or whatever. We schedule those throughout the day, different days of the week, just to sort of make it easier for the part-time students to attend stuff. But yes, of course, you have us just as much as the MS students do.
Thank you.
And employers also don't actually care about the difference. I mean, they like the part-time students a lot.
Hi, Nora Hogan. So I noticed on the list of what platforms people went into, there were 5 in on-air reporting specifically, obviously with most people going into writing. Do you think this program, like in a very candid way, do you think this program makes sense for people who specifically know they want to go into broadcast?
Yes, of course.
In front of the camera.
You brought something up that I usually mention and I forgot to. The on-air reporters, yes, we have a lot of students who do that. But what happens is that particular world, like the smaller stations hiring reporters, they don't have like this big internship process. You just basically get a full-time job. So students who want to do on-air reporting, they have to wait until they get to the expo and they can show a little bit of their reel, or maybe they might not even have a reel until the end of the year, and they're putting together their reel as the year is ending, and they're sending out, 30 or copies of their materials to individual stations that are advertising for an on-air reporter. So that's one, sector that actually increases sort of predictably after we finish gathering all of our data.
Sorry, follow-up.
Yes.
Definitely can graduate with a full reel to send out?
There is somebody on our team who's the broadcast person. I'm sort of the print person, but it's my understanding that you need time to sort of pull it together. But at the expo, most students do have a little something to show, like a 1.5 minute to 2 minute feature story to show editors. And what editors are looking for is they're not looking for how you look. This is not what the editors are looking for, how you report. That is what the school focuses on. Everybody here learns investigative techniques, including the broadcast students and the data students. And reporting is the thing that employers come back to the journalism school for year after year to find. Regardless of what's happening, regardless of what bells and whistles are being taught or being highlighted in the industry that year, reporting is the foundation, and that's what you get here. Any questions from outer space? Nope? Okay. Thanks so much, and good luck with your decision.
Okay, back again here. I am going to run briefly through the admission process, the application, that sort of thing, and then Taryn will be back to talk about budgeting, financial planning, scholarships, financial aid, and all of those sorts of things where I know people also have a lot of questions. And then also, after we have finished, we will all be here, Taryn, Ross, David, Gina, myself, to answer questions that you might have. If you have very individual questions, we can also go downstairs to the admissions office. And finally, just also a reminder for those of you who are interested, Jim has kindly offered to give a tour of the broadcast area, both the television and radio area upstairs on the 5th floor, so that you can get an idea of the kinds of things that you would learn how to do here if you were interested in those areas. So I want to start with admissions. The application deadlines are all on the website, but I'll just run through them quickly. The 15th of December is the deadline for full and part-time Master of Science, for data journalism, and for the doctoral program. For anybody who's listening who is interested in the doctoral program in communications, which we've pretty much left out today, but which we will be having some webinars for later in the fall. The 6th of January is the deadline for the Master of Arts applications. If you are submitting a Master of Arts application, you want to be sure. We're pretty much looking for experienced journalists there, but as Professor Haydu mentioned when he was speaking, we also do look at students coming directly from undergraduate school who have very solid journalism experience and journalism training already. But that deadline is the 6th of January. And you can also elect in the MA application to ask to be considered for both the MA and the MS, just in case. We will also do the same thing for data students and for dual degree students. We can consider you for the regular MS as well. The 15th of January is the deadline for the dual degree program with computer science, and that is the only application which actually you need to apply for through the engineering school website. All of the other applications, just hit the apply button on the J-School website. It will take you directly to the application and all of the instructions for completing the application. So what's in the application? In general, for all programs, there's a section for personal information, name, address, date of birth, all that sort of thing. You'll also submit a resume. You'll submit 3 letters of reference. You will submit transcripts from every university that you have attended since you left high school. I'm going to say that again, from every university you have ever attended. For international students where the transcript is not in English, please have the International Students Office at your university translate it if they offer that service, or have an official translation service do the translation for us. But we will need both transcripts. We'll need the original language version, and we'll also need the English translation. We also will ask that international students use one of the agencies that does the equivalencies between U.S. bachelor's degrees and international student bachelor's degrees. But at the time that you're applying, you can upload unofficial copies of your applications. We'll ask for the official copies later. For students in the United States, what we are really looking for is something that has come from the registrar's office. Okay, so we do not want the things that you can run off of the student database system, because often those printouts do not contain things like your name or the name of your university, and they don't have the degree information. We need all of that information. Just read the application instructions carefully for that. If you have questions about any of it, you can get in touch with us. Writing samples. The students have already addressed that a little bit. We ask for 2 essays, one of which is autobiographical. The second is about your interest in journalism and why you want to study at Columbia. Different journalism schools approach journalism in different ways. They approach journalism education in different ways, and sometimes have different specialty areas. It's important for you to look carefully at what Columbia is offering, and to think about and make the argument for why you want to come and learn journalism here at Columbia. If you are applying to a specialty area in either data journalism, documentary filmmaking, investigative journalism, or any of the 4 concentrations that Jane Eisner mentioned in the MA program, so arts and culture, business, politics, science, there will be a 3rd essay that you'll write about your interest in the program or the specialization that you're applying to. You will also submit writing samples, and I know one of you had asked a question about the writing samples earlier. The writing samples can take a variety of forms. If you have something that is journalistic, that is preferable. It can be something from a student newspaper. It can be something that you've done as a professional journalist that's been published. It can be a blog that you have done. It can be if you have no journalism experience, because there are plenty of people here who come to us, like Tay, with no journalism experience. So you have to figure out what you're going to do. You could submit an academic writing sample if you've got those. If, for example, you have been working in the financial industry or another industry that requires you to write analysis, evaluation of something, country analysis, the financial situations in different countries, that sort of thing. Those kinds of things can also be appropriate as writing samples. But if you have any questions about what you might want to submit, absolutely feel free to get in touch with us, just, so we can talk about it with you. For people who are applying to the MA program, we are interested in professional writing samples. Just professional writing samples. What am I leaving out? TOEFL or IELTS. For those of you who will be applying who are non-native English speakers, 1, and number 2, spent your entire undergraduate academic career at a university where the language of instruction was other than English, you will need to take either the TOEFL or the IELTS and submit those scores. If you have any questions about whether you need to take the TOEFL for international students, just get in touch with us by email, telephone, whatever it is. Let us know what your particular situation is, and we'll be able to let you know what you need to do. For MS students, so Master of Science students, all Master of Science applicants need to take a writing test, which our student panel addressed very briefly. What is that writing test? It is a 90-minute test. It's broken up into 3 30-minute sections. Don't get scared. It's not nearly as bad as the GRE, the LSAT, the GMAT, the SAT, any of those, believe me. And it's designed to give us an idea of what your writing is like when you sit down and have to produce something immediately. So that way we have 3 examples of what your writing is like. We've got the essays that you've written, we've got the written materials, the writing samples that you've given us, and then we have the writing test. So we've got examples of things that we assume somebody else will have cast an eye over it, whether an editor or a friend, that sort of thing. But the writing test shows us what happens when you sit down and are answering some questions right off the bat, gives us an idea about sentence structure, punctuation, paragraph structure, ability to analyze, ability to synthesize quickly. We don't expect you to be able to be brilliant at that right now. That's why you want to come to journalism school, is to really learn those skills and to improve the skills that you've already got. But we are looking over all of that writing just to give us an idea of where you are in your reporting, in your writing, in your thinking. The test itself is the questions. Each section you have several questions that you can choose from. They do refer to things that have been happening in current events over the last year. They're not trick questions. We're not going to ask you to name the people on the Supreme Court. We're not going to ask you something very specific. The questions are designed so that you can take examples from your own life, from your own town, city, country. But they are also designed to give us some idea of your participation and your interest in the news and in current events. GRE. Do not take the GRE for Columbia Journalism School. I repeat, do not take the GRE. If you're taking it for other graduate schools of journalism, because several of our sister schools do require it, do not spend your money having the scores sent here. The faculty are allergic to GRE scores. They feel very strongly that they are not an indicator of who is going to be a good journalist. Do not send GRE scores here. Spend your money and send them elsewhere. Also, on the work samples that you can submit, you can also submit audio samples and video samples if you have those. For documentary film students, you'll also want to have some kind of video sample just to give us an idea of what your video work or experience might be like. If you're going to submit audio or video samples, submit the scripts also. Because before you can do something audio and before you can do something that's video, there has to be reporting and there has to be a script. We are looking, I think as Gina mentioned and as the faculty mentioned, we're looking for evidence of your reporting. We're looking for evidence of the writing that you do as well. Okay, that I think is it. Think about the application as you're telling your story. You're writing an argument for why you want to be a journalist and why you want to study at Columbia Journalism. We're looking for evidence of a good fit. The programs here are very short. We're the shortest term to degree of any of our sister graduate schools of journalism. The MS program is 9.5 months. The MA program is 9 months. We are looking for students who can deal with and who want an intensive experience. We're looking for people who are looking for a community of journalists who love storytelling, who are passionate about journalism. We're looking for curiosity. I forget which one of you, it might have been Vidya who mentioned it, that she sometimes feels like she's all over the place in her interests. For some careers where that is a negative, in journalism, having many interests is positive. That's something that we're looking for. That's something editors are looking for, because you're going to be asked to work on stories about many, many different subjects unless you're already focused in a very particular area. So curiosity, interest in many things is viewed very, very positively here. I'm going to stop here and take 2 or 3 questions. Anybody have any questions about the application? If you would go to the microphone, please.
Hi, my name is Sarah Morano. My question is for the writing samples. Like in my experiences, a lot of the writing is kind of more, it's a little bit journalistic, but it has kind of like a public relations feel to it. And I was just wondering like how that's treated when you're reading it, and just in general, like the place of like public relations type writing versus what you're doing in journalism school.
That's actually a great question. We're looking for things that show evidence of reporting and writing. Something that's public relations-ish is possible. It's important to note that journalism and public relations tend to be at opposite ends of the spectrum from each other. So if there is the possibility to do some work that shows journalistic writing, journalistic reporting and writing, that will really be an asset. If you don't have experience with that, if you haven't had that kind of opportunity here in the United States, look at some of the local news outlets. And what I'm thinking about here are things like community newspapers, the Brooklyn Eagle, some of the community newspapers here on the west side, in Queens, in Chelsea, on the east side, where they're looking for actually volunteers. This would be probably some of the unpaid work that Gina referred to, but where they're looking for volunteers to report on school board meetings, to report on local community happenings like the street fair out here on Broadway this morning and this afternoon. Pitch some stories and see if you can get some of those. It's October. You've got enough time to do it. Give it a try. Yes.
Hi, I'm Karen. I'm actually a chemistry PhD student here at Columbia, looking to go into science journalism. You only talked about undergraduate degree outside of U.S. or non-English speaking countries for TOEFL exemption. What about the advanced degree from English speaking institutions? And also, a second question is, do you get a lot of research scientists admitted into Columbia Journalism School? Thank you.
2 good questions. When we're considering a waiver of either the TOEFL or the IELTS, it's your undergraduate language of instruction that counts. So if your undergraduate education was in a language other than English, you must take either the TOEFL or the IELTS. So you would, if it's past 2 years, you'll have to take it again. Yeah. And the reason for that is, for most people, the place where they get the most intensive English writing training has been in high school and college at the undergraduate level. So that's why we're looking for that. Okay. Oh, there was one more question. Oh, research scientists. I would say that the research scientists are relatively few. However, each year I always have physicians in the class. There are people who come to us from nursing, and there are people who come to us who are interested in science journalism because they want to learn how to do journalism that will be interesting and appealing to mass audiences. Because as Professor Weiner was talking about, climate change is, really the story of the century. And that's going to continue to be one of the biggest stories. And so we have a lot of interest from people who are pursuing advanced degrees in the sciences. Yes.
Hi, my name is Nicole McNulty, and my question also pertains to the writing samples. I was curious if there's a preferred length for them, because I have pieces that range from like 800 words to like a 4,000 word profile. So I was curious if there's submitted range or...
We give, and I can't remember, I'm blanking on how much it is, David. 15 pages. No more than 15 pages. What I would say about all of the work samples, choose your very best. And best may be shorter.
Great.
One of the things you would find if you were to come here is that you're going to be asked to cut and cut and cut and cut. Shorter is better.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Raja. I have another writing sample question. You mentioned for like the multimedia clips that you submit, like you should submit a script with the video clip. What if you have like a really good script that's well reported and the video is still in production and it won't be like completed until after the deadline? Is it okay to just send a script as a writing sample?
You can send that as a writing sample, and then if the video itself is completed by, I believe it's January 10th this year, Friday, January 10th, you'd be able to send it on to us after the deadline.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary. I was just curious how many applicants you typically get for the MS program and how many are ultimately accepted.
We look for a class, the full-time class of 180, 185. Part-time students, I'm looking for about 30, to enroll 30. The data students, I'm looking for between 15 and 20 students. The dual degree with computer science, I'm also looking for anywhere from 10 to 15. Those are all separate pools. And then the Stabile program has a separate pool. The documentary program has a separate pool as well. But overall, I would say it's going to be in the neighborhood of 450, 500 applications.
Thank you.
Hi. For the letters of reference, I'm wondering if there might be a preference between academic and professional letters.
Great question. Yes. Both are fine. Both academic and professional references are fine. The most important thing about your references is that they should come from people who have been in the position of supervising and evaluating your work. So, it can be a professor, it can be an editor. If you've been out of school for 10 years, of course, it's going to be somebody who's been a supervisor. If you have continued to be in contact with a professor and you feel that it's really appropriate, that will also work. So, but use as your guidelines somebody who has supervised and evaluated your work, because we're asking them to evaluate for us your promise as a journalist. Okay, I'm going to stop right there and turn things over to Taryn Almanzar to talk about money.
Okay, so now we're on to the fun part. I'm being sarcastic. I'll start off by saying that we do offer scholarship funding here at the J School, whether you are a domestic student or an international student. So, but in order for us to evaluate and know what you're eligible for, you have to apply. There is a separate scholarship aid application, which will be available in December. So be on the lookout for that. Before I start getting into what is required, what are we looking for, if you walk away from here remembering something about the financial aid side of things, is that you must apply for it and that our admissions is need blind. What does need blind mean? Admissions is need blind. We will not look at your financial status in order to determine if you're going to be admitted into the program or not. Every year, we have a couple of admitted students who do not apply for scholarship funding because they either think we're going to be looking at the application to determine if they're going to be admitted or not, or they feel like, on the other end of the spectrum, I'm going to submit my admissions app, but I'm not so sure I'm going to be admitted. Don't fall into that pitfall. Apply, apply, apply. Okay? So everybody's going to remember that, right? Yes. Nod your head. So with that said, in order to be eligible for scholarship funding, all of our funding comes in from donations that are made to the school, so there is awarding restrictions. In order to be eligible for any of it, we will look at what the eligibility requirements are, academic merits as determined by the admissions committee, and financial need as determined by the financial aid scholarship application. So those are the three main eligibility requirements. The awards can range, the median award can range anywhere from $30,000 to about $150,000 depending on the program, because they are divided by program and every year it's a little bit different. The deadline for the scholarship aid application will be January 15th. So it's out December 1st and the deadline will be January 15th. So that's one way of covering your cost of coming here. The other source of funding, it's outside scholarship, and these are private organizations that are offering students funds. Even if you decide that you're not going to be attending the J School or whatever the case may be, it's a great resource and it's a great way of mitigating your costs. We start you off with a listing on our site. It's not a waste of time. Do the research. They have their own application deadlines, amounts that are available. So start that search now. Student loans are a reality. Students are borrowing. So start looking into that. If you are a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, the federal government will offer you loans. They don't offer any grants, unfortunately, but the student loans are available. You can look on our site for further information about that, but start getting comfortable with it or not, so that you know what you're getting yourself into. For international students, the federal government does not offer any student loans, but they are private lenders, banks, that are willing to lend student funds. Columbia has a listing of suggested lenders. They are suggested. You can go with anyone and any institution that you like, but it's a great starting point just to see what are the kind of things that you should be paying attention to, such as what are the repayment criteria, how much are you able to borrow, what's considered a late payment, how about if you go into an unpaid internship, or if you want to continue with your studies, what are the flexibilities? So those are the key things to look at. I know I've given you a very broad overview. Each situation is different. We're here to answer any of your questions. Like I said before, asking questions saves a lot of guessing work. So with that, I would like to open it up for questions. Does anybody have any questions regarding that? And then we'll take it from there. Mm-hmm.
Hi.
Hi.
My name's Max.
Hi, Max.
So I had a couple questions.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
One would be, you mentioned getting federal loans. I'm assuming we're doing the FAFSA for that. We're using the previous tax return paperwork for that, correct?
That is correct. That is an excellent question. So for U.S. citizen and permanent resident, we will require the FAFSA, and that is the information that will be used to determine your loan eligibility. But here's the thing. For graduate students, the amount is pretty much set. It's $20,500 in the unsubsidized loan, and then for the Graduate Plus loan, you can borrow up to the cost of attendance. Cost of attendance entails tuition, fees, and living expenses. So you're able to borrow up to that. regardless of financial need. What they're looking for are three main eligibility requirements. You must be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, take at least 6 credits per term, and not be in default of a prior student loan. Those are the three main eligibility requirements that they're looking for.
Okay.
And when I say they, I mean the Department of Education.
And then I guess my other question was, do you have any graduate assistantships or teaching assistantships that would help defer the cost of tuition?
That's a great question. And the answer to that, no. And then I'll tell you why. That'll lead to the reason why I say categorically no. If you're doing the full-time program, please, please, please do not count on being able to work to mitigate the cost of coming here. Why do I say that? It's very intense. If you remember the length of time, 9.5, 9 months, it's just not enough time for you to be able to do any type of work. Will you find graduates that say, oh, I was able to work, I was able to do this? Absolutely. My counter question for them would be, how did that go? So please do not plan on working while you're here.
You are able to work at the part-time program.
That is correct. Excellent question. His follow-up question was, if you are in the part-time program, are you able to work? Yes. And that is the option for most people that want to continue to work or want to have that flexibility. They will go into the part-time program because it allows you to do that. However, as you're thinking of the part-time program, keep in mind that you're going to need at least 1 day out of the work week to dedicate to your reporting. Because remember, the MS program, it's very hands-on. As soon as you walk in through those doors, you will be treated as a reporter. You will have a beat, you will have assignment, you have deadlines. And some of your sources will be able to meet with you during normal business hours. So keep that in the back of your mind as you're planning and thinking of doing the part-time program.
Hi. So I'm Dita. I was just wondering how financial eligibility is determined, seeing as, I guess, if you're a recent graduate, before you used to be dependent on your parents' taxes, and now when the financial aid application is due, taxes aren't being done yet. So how do we use pay stubs, or like how is financial eligibility?
Great question. Thank you. So we will not, here at the J School, we will not look at your parents' information. You're in graduate school, you are an independent student. Do not send me your parents' tax forms. Do not tell me about their savings. That's not what we want. We want your information. As far as what the tax is not being filed, do your best estimate. And then if you see that what you have estimated is way off, then you can get in contact with us at a later point. I know that January 15th, it's way ahead of the time of when the taxes are being filed, and we understand that. So give us your best estimate, and we'll work with that. Any other questions? No? Okay. So with that, thanks again. Hopefully we'll see you here as students so we can talk about the time that you came in on October 5th on a beautiful Saturday morning. And for those of you who are watching us via live stream, you can say, I saw you. So with that, thank you. We're here. Stay tuned. We're going to have webinars, other information sessions. And for those of you who are here, remember that Jim Patel, thanks Jim, has offered to show the broadcast studio. Thank you.